Minds. I'm Tim Neiman. This is where life lessons meet leadership, where business gets a front row seat, and where you will get a blueprint for success. Whether you're managing a team, building a brand, or just trying to lead yourself better, you are in the right place because here on Straight Lines, we believe the shortest distance between purpose and progress is truth, clarity, and action. Straight Lines brought to you in part by Baseball Blue Book. Baseball Blue Book has been the game's trusted directory since 1909, and now it's where businesses connect directly with players, parents, and coaches. Create a profile, promote your services, and join the community. If your business wants to stand out, it's time to get in the book. Download Baseball Blue Book today from Apple or Google Play. Pleased to be joined today from a good friend of mine, somebody I'm very proud of and doing a heck of a job in his baseball career. It's been quite the journey. But I'm joined by Sean Buchanan, who's currently the AAA pitching coach for the Houston Astros at Sugarland, and also is the assistant coordinator of pitching for the Houston Astros, all of minor league baseball from rookie ball all the way up through AAA. Sean, thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate you being with the old ball coach.
Yeah, Big Wheel, thank you for having me, man. It's a pleasure to be here.
So we'll go right into some good stuff off the bat because, people can Google you and me and find out where we've been and all that stuff. But at the AAA level, Sean, what's what are the separators from making that step from AAA, to the big leagues? Beyond the AAA guy puts up a lot of good numbers, metrics, those kinds of things, but how do you know they're truly ready to go from Sugarland to Houston?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm not sure if there is a direct answer to that, to be completely honest with you. Obviously, it's a numbers game, right? We know that if you're not putting up numbers in AAA, they're not just magically going to appear in the big leagues. What we do know is if you have good numbers in AAA, there's a chance you could be successful in the big leagues, but we never truly know until you get there. We could have all the best projections in the world and have all the advanced stats and metrics and talk about guys' makeup. But until you're there, until you have 40,000 people screaming at you and you have big league hitters stepping into the box against you, there is no one-to-one test for that. It's trial by fire when you get there. There are guys that, sure, we feel very strongly that this guy is going to be successful at the next level, but until you get there, there is no true way of knowing.
Yeah, it's certainly different. I mean, you're in AAA, you might be in front of a crowd of 10,000 someday, which is really good. And then you multiply that by 4 or 5, and depending on what city you are in, now all of a sudden you have all those other things, filling in on top of you. They're falling on you. Now, how are you going to deal with all those kinds of things? How about the philosophy for Houston Astros? How's the pitching philosophy evolved, since you've been there and perhaps even right before you've got there, Sean?
Yeah, so I'm going into year 5 with the Astros now, and believe it or not, that kind of makes me a little bit long in the tooth and one of the grizzled veterans in the pitching department. But as far as the philosophy in my time here, the philosophy has always been driven by one thing and one thing only, and that is maximizing our players' potential. The beliefs around that philosophy have constantly been changing. We need to continue to adapt and evolve and build on top of the foundations that we have. And I think that's true for really any sort of endeavor where you're trying to be the best. Like your values are your guiding light, but your beliefs need to change around those values or you will get past. If you want to talk the baseball example, everybody used to value pitching down in the zone. And then everybody or used to believe that pitching down in the zone was the way to achieve the value of creating player success. And then the belief was hitters at the top rail. And now the belief is multiple fastball types so that nobody knows what's coming anymore. But the value has always been player production, player value, and punching people out.
That rectangular strike zone is that shape for a reason, right? So, it's good to stay down. In the old days, we get those ground balls and all that kind of stuff, and like anything in baseball, it's such a great game of adjustments. That people will. Hitters are going to adjust. Hey, this guy's sinker type guy, got to move up in the box perhaps a little bit, try to get deeper in the count, get him tired, try to get a fastball elevated, so we have a better shot, but to be able to use all four corners and, that whole entire rectangle is kind of critical to success. And yes, from a philosophical standpoint, it's about the individual. We're trying to, no different than when you're with me at the sales and no different where you're now, trying to make that individual better so he can contribute to the whole of the success of the ball club. And I think you do a great job with that. But it doesn't really change much in baseball or any other organization for sure. Just the way good organizations and good businesses work. It's just how it is. Got to make that player better, that employee better. And then we all have success and we share it in that success. About mechanically, I know pretty much that was, old school stuff, a lot of mechanics. Man, I can make your 10-year-old look pretty good. Doesn't mean he's going to get anybody out, right? But I think there's still certain things that probably happen in a delivery. Do you see anything that's a kind of a common flaw that you might stumble upon?
Yeah, I think it starts with making sure that the individual has enough strength and mobility to do whatever you might ask him to do next. I think younger players um, maybe don't have a lot of experience in the weight room, and you could tell them to move one way and they won't be able to figure it out. It doesn't mean that they're going to be able to hold that position. So once we know that the player has the foundational strength and mobility to get into positive positions, then the next thing I'm going to look towards is okay, what does the timing of this whole entire sequence look like? Is there a good window of repeatability for this guy? Is the arm up on time? Where is he at foot strike? And it really comes down to the timing within the mechanics because everybody's mechanics to a certain extent are going to be specific to them, right? And it's no different than how hitters stand in the box. Right? I don't think there's any two hitters that stand exactly the same in the box, just like there's no two pitchers who throw the ball exactly the same. But if we look at different timestamps within the delivery or within the swing, we're going to see that they are at least giving themselves a chance to be successful. So if I was to try to narrow it down to one thing that we're going to look at, is once we know that this guy is strong enough and mobile enough, then we're going to look at timing and just see where he is at foot strike, see where the arm is at, where is he at ball release, and make any necessary adjustments from there.
Yeah, and I think you hit a lot of really key points. And you and I were together not about a month or so ago, and we are comparing old school, new school, and kind of stumbled on the term now school. I mean, this is what's going on now. There's a combination, perhaps, of a little bit of both. And you know what? Next week it could be a little different. Could change again. Could change in 6 months into a year. And I think movement is certainly key. I think athletes in general, if they don't move well, will struggle and be very perhaps one-dimensional. And you mentioned timing, which I think is really important. I mean, hitters need to be on time. Pitchers need to be on time. When that foot hits, that strikes, am I really ready to release the ball with, my maximum effort? I think those are all key. And I see where I mean, there's certain things I think can happen. Every pitcher is certainly balance and all kinds of things, but how they get to the swing when they get to contact and how they get to release as a pitcher is kind of unique to them, is specific to them. And, do all those moving parts come together for a successful delivery? And hopefully they're throwing the best pitch in baseball, a strike. That always helps pretty good. So we got to balance those individual strengths, with the organizational standards, if you will. And I'm guessing you run across some guys, where they have some tools, they have some ability, and perhaps they don't meet what the Astros are trying to, convey with their staff, or could be vice versa too. Could be. Any thoughts along those lines? You get somebody, it's like, man, this guy, and then somehow, it's not working out. This guy doesn't click.
Yeah, I think you have to have a certain level of stuff, right? You're not going to be able to command a fastball at 83 miles an hour all the way to the big leagues. It does not matter. Like, there is a certain level of stuff that is going to get you into the conversation. Um, After that, it's how well can you control that stuff. And it's a spectrum, right? This little give and take where maybe I am willing to give up really harping on command if the stuff is ultra special. Now, I'm not giving up on command completely, but maybe I don't need you to completely dot the black every single time because your stuff is ultra special. So it slides a little bit. Now, if your stuff is a couple ticks below ultra special, then yeah, I'm going to need you to command it a little bit better. And that's more of where our conversation is going to be focused. And it's kind of just this sliding scale back and forth where you can never truly live on one side or the other. You could have the best stuff in the history of baseball, 107-mile-an-hour fastball with 30 inches of hop, things that nobody's ever heard of before. But if that thing is hitting the backstop every single time, it doesn't matter. Just like if you're throwing 83, but you just paint the black every single time, that also does not matter. It's that sliding scale of command and stuff that we're constantly trying to strike the balance with.
Yeah, I think I always looked at high school pitchers, or anybody really was asked to take a peek at it. Command, if you don't, stuff. You got to have stuff. If you don't have stuff, you are not going to win. You're just not. You can put up the smoke screen and mirror show for a while, maybe get through a few hitters, but eventually good hitters, good clubs are going to adjust, especially the higher level you are at. But if you don't come to the ballpark with some kind of stuff, it's going to be a tough chore. You may end up, playing that second position if you're a high school player, especially. And you mentioned command, and I want to talk more about that with you. And you make a good explanation of it. And, and I'm a little bit of old school scout from way back in the day, many years ago, where I was always taught command, movement, velocity in that order usually wins from any level, from little league all the way up to the big leagues. But again, that's a caveat. You got to have a little bit of stuff to go with it, but that doesn't get you drafted, right? That doesn't get you an opportunity. I mean, I can dot every I and have a little bit of stuff, but I'm 82-4. Doesn't resonate as a professional pitcher. Just doesn't. So it kind of flips over, right? Got to have velocity. Hopefully there's some movement along those lines, which can equate to stuff. And then, hey, can we command all that stuff? I think that still kind of holds true to some level, where I've seen guys, and I've seen AAA level, in the Lehigh Valley, where guys can throw the absolute heck out of it with stuff. And, we might as well put a 3-2 count on the scoreboard because it'll end up there. They just don't, they just can't command enough. Pitch count soars. The outing is small in terms of, they're going to have pitch counts for that day. Starter might have 80 on him for that outing, and he hits it in the third or fourth inning as opposed to maybe getting into the fifth or sixth. So I think it does have an effect. Your thoughts just command, movement, velocity, wherever you want to go with that. I'd be interested to hear what you think, Sean.
Sure. Yeah. Those are the three things that I think pitchers are trying to judge themselves on in comparison to their peers, in comparison to what they see on YouTube or what they see the guy across town doing or the guys on the other team. Um, but in terms of command, stuff, and velocity, I think that is we're looking. We're not looking at things from the 10,000-foot view. I think first you got to look at swing and miss, walk percentage, and opposing slug against. Like, are you giving up damage? Are you walking guys? Are you punching people out? Like, ask yourself those three questions first. And if there's an issue within those three questions, then you look to the command, stuff, and velocity. Because usually those three things will tell you why those three things above the the just the pure stuff, command, and velocity. Um, those are the answers. You got to make sure you're asking the right question first. If you're punching out the world and nobody can hit you and you're not walking anybody, then I don't need to know what your command, your stuff, and your
Right.
velocity is. I think it's fine.
Yeah, that'll work, right? We're getting some people out for sure. I like that again. So
Right.
we're talking about swing and miss. We're talking about, you're walking people, or are you punching people out? I think that's a very uh, a clear blanket, if you will, with pitchers to whether they're successful or not. Swing and miss is huge. You mean that, and again, it kind of goes back to stuff, right? I mean, they're swinging and missing, your stuff's pretty good, and all I got to do is be in that triangle, that of the strike zone, and it doesn't matter if I'm sitting on the block. Not with that, not with that good stuff. And I think those are really good lessons and clear indication of why Houston's so successful, and some other clubs in the same manner. But you're going to get those guys that somehow, yep, I got some swing and miss stuff, but the problem is I never give the hitter a chance to swing and miss. Right? It's we always talked about with our guys, contain your misses. Don't miss by, I can't miss by 6 inches or 8 inches. I can't. At least got to stay around that rectangular strike zone. But I think that's terrific stuff right there. Do you get any pushback at all, Sean? You probably saw it maybe with the younger guys, but as your career has been evolving just a step from the big leagues, do you get pushback from pitchers like, come on, man, I've been successful. What are you talking about?
Sure. I mean, that's going to happen from time to time, especially as you climb the ranks and start dealing with the older, more mature players. You start to get to this point where these guys have families and this has been their career and this is their livelihood. Like, they pay their mortgage by playing baseball. So they understandably might be very guarded in the way that they do things because they know maybe if I try something new, maybe I fall apart and now I don't have a job. So when you're going to make adjustments or when you're going to approach, especially the older player, you need to make sure that your timing is right. And you need to make sure that you're coming with the best possible information and you understand the individual that you're about to approach. Um, so that you can start to frame their understanding of things that's going to help move the needle in the most positive direction. You're going to create pushback all on your own if you just come in guns blazing and you're just like, nope, 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 got to change this, got to do that, got to do this, got to do that. Yeah, you'll get a ton of pushback that way. But if you have enough tact in what you're doing and you approach it the right way, that severely limits the pushback.
I think that's a fantastic perspective, Sean, and I think it shows why you are moving up the ladder and been entrenched with the Astros organization so far This is their livelihood. It's how they make their money, pay their mortgage, as you said. I think that's pretty key. I think sometimes younger guys would maybe push a little harder because, if they know everything until all of a sudden, geez, my pitching coach in the A-ball was pretty smart. He knew what he was talking about. Really good. If you're enjoying straight lines and the conversations we're having, I would love to bring that same energy to your organization. I speak to teams, conferences, schools, and groups about leadership, resilience, and living a life that will cast a large shadow. If you're looking for someone who connects, encourages, and inspires you with real life stories that matter, I'm available for your keynote and special events. Please reach out to me at coachtimneiman.com. I would be honored to serve your group. Visiting here with Sean Buchanan, the AAA pitching coach for the Houston Astros and assistant coordinator of pitching for the minor league organization, and doing a fantastic job. Really insightful information and answers so far to what we're doing, and hopefully sheds a little, cast a larger shadow, if you will, on the folks that are listening, and gives them a little more perspective of where we are these days. It's not the old school. It's not the new school. It's the now school. And I think all those things blended together, as Sean is doing and Houston does, really helps accelerate that success and the probability of success, which is happening in Houston's organization. All right, so let's talk some of the newer stuff. Really not so new anymore, but people will still look at that way 30 years from now. The data and the analytics, and so how do you incorporate all that into a bullpen, or how do you incorporate that from an outing? You go back, maybe watch the video and kind of, or maybe even pregame, certainly AAA level, probably going over some hitters. So how are we implementing, the data analytics to, make that individual pitcher better?
Yeah, so I think it's very prescriptive. What we have in terms of access to data, to numbers and measurements, like it's a bottomless list. If you can possibly think of it, we can find a way to measure it and slap a number on it and use it somehow. But that doesn't mean it needs to be player facing, right? The players, they just need a prescription that is going to put them in the best spot to be successful. And that comes down to just knowing your guys. There are some people, that I've worked with that have an unbelievable feel for the data, and we can get super deep into the weeds and start talking aerodynamics of ball flight and biomechanics and all kinds of stuff. And then there are other people that I've worked with where it's like, I need you to put one foot here and the other foot there. Go. And both of those both of those conversations are framed by data, though. Like, I'm not just arbitrarily saying put one foot here, one foot there. We've gone through an in-depth biomechanical assessment and tracked trends and angular velocities and everything you could imagine, but we boiled it all the way down to one foot here, one foot there. And that's how the conversation needs to be framed for some people. For other people, sure, let's get in the weeds. Let's talk about those angular velocities and degrees of separation. But that's not everybody. So you got to be prescriptive about what the individual needs and what they can handle. And that starts with just knowing the person and having a relationship with them before you start to go down these rabbit holes.
I love that's basically like running camp, right? You've got 8-year-olds, 9-year-olds, 10-year-olds,
Yeah.
all different, right? All different personalities, all different abilities, perhaps, and you just magnify that with guys that can do some pretty special things on the baseball field and get paid to do it. It's pretty cool. I mean, it lends itself to your ability as a leader to go ahead and connect with each different player, and how different they all are. They just are. There's no blanket way to coach, I don't think, because you've got to start with the individual, and then hopefully collectively they, are put on a performance and are productive enough to help the ball club win. I love the prescriptive part of that. I think that's outstanding. Anything that you know that you love data wise that matter most? Maybe it's in a game. Are we? I'm sure you're implementing some sort of spray chart, perhaps. I don't know, or hitters' tendencies. I'm guessing. Is there any data there that matters to you the most in a game, or maybe it's just in a bullpen? And are any of that stuff like you mentioned? You could get a number for anything. Is there anything like, come on, this is a little bit on the overrated side. We don't really need to go down that rabbit hole as you mentioned, Sean.
Yeah, I guess let's start on the overrated side of things. I know all the baseball purists out there and everybody watching the game still is looking at the ERA numbers and stuff like that. To me, that's probably the most overrated one, especially when you're looking through the minor leagues. We're experimenting a lot with defenses and positioning and guys trying different things. There are so many things going on the field. There's a development plan for the outfielders, for the infielders, for the catcher, for the pitcher, and maybe those development plans aren't completely in alignment for making every single play. Maybe we're trying to challenge a shortstop to be better to his glove side, so we're shading him to his offside a little bit more than we normally would. So if a ground ball gets through that should have been caught and it ends up on the stat line as a hit and comes around to score, like, I don't care about your ERA. That stuff happens all the time. Um, as far as what I like to look at, that is completely dependent on the goals that we have for that pitcher. I love the fact that we are able to measure pretty much everything. So that means that I can kind of have my play sheet for each pitcher that night. And like, okay, here's what I'm looking for. Here's what I'm trying to track, and going to keep it like specific to just that guy. Um, I get very excited about new ways of looking at things and new data and new measurements, because you never know what could be the unlock for specific players. So I try to be a generalist and have at least a base understanding of anything that we can possibly measure. And then I will lock in on it based on what the player in front of me is working on.
Can you going in with that plan for a particular outing, or whether he's a starter or he's scripted for an inning or 30 pitches or whatever, let's just, I guess, focus on the starter. Can you make any in-game adjustments with that guy? Or are you going to really kind of stick to what the game plan is? So maybe things aren't going the way it should, and he needs a lifeline. Can you give him something, right, to pull him out? I always thought it was very difficult, making a mound visit during a game. You can't really talk about mechanics and all that stuff. It's more psychological warfare with the kid on the bump. And I'm kind of guessing it's probably the same. But how do you make adjustments if you can? Or it may happen in the dugout saying, look, let's get ahead with our breaking ball is really good. When we change the sequence a little bit, let's get ahead with the breaking ball and then go fastball a little bit backwards. How do you view that, Sean?
Yeah, I think some of the easiest things to adjust and make impacts on are just some usages and attack plans, trying to make sure that we are putting ourselves in a position to be successful. But a lot of times, what goes on in the dugout and what goes on during mound visits is trying to keep guys in the boat, right? We don't want them to jump ship on whatever the development plan is. We like to make sure that we are as prepared as possible. So we're going into this game knowing what we're trying to accomplish. And there are plenty of instances where guys are just like, nope, scrap it. I'm going back. I'm going back to whatever I was doing before because this is just
Right.
not working. And a lot of the times, like I said, it's just keeping guys in the boat. Keep them in the boat until they start to see success with the plan, and then they'll start to row the boat on their own.
That's terrific. I mean, I love, give me the damn boat, right? Let's go. Stay put. It'll be okay. Got the
Keep them in the
seatbelt
boat.
on. We're okay. Can't have team killers, that's for sure. In every workplace and every team, there are unseen forces that can derail success. In my book, Team Killers, I uncover the behaviors, attitudes, and habits that destroy chemistry and show you how to build a winning culture instead. If you're a leader, coach, or teammate who wants lasting success, this book is your playbook. Get your copy of Team Killers today and protect your team from the inside out. Go to my website, CoachTimNeiman.com. You can get it on Amazon as well. Visiting here with Sean Buchanan, having a great conversation about baseball and pitching specifically, which I knew we would. And I'm sure we're going to get into some other, talking about great conversation about people and how and be able to make those adjustments, be where they are, right? You can meet them where they are and go from there and keep them on the damn boat. That's outstanding. So, let's keep going a little back into segment 2 here. Um, Mental hurdles that you've come across for these guys. I'm sure, and I don't think it matters by age. You probably see more younger ones than older ones, but you know, you come across that kind of stuff. This guy, we got to get by this mentally. What's your feeling, Sean?
Yeah. So at the minor league level, you run into two specific hurdles with most guys at one point or another. You're going to hit this one. The first one is I'm being really successful with where I'm at. Why am I not moving up? Um, Guys don't really see the bigger picture. There's a lot of things that are at play in terms of player movement and why those things happen and when they happen. So a guy could be dominating the world at a specific level for a month, and he every time the manager walks into the room, his head perks up. He's like, "Is it? Am I going? Am I going up? Am I going up?" Maybe somebody goes up that they think they're better than, right? It happens all the time. So combating that is something that's going to happen with everyone. It can especially get sticky when guys will see that start to happen. They'll say, "Well, obviously, what I'm doing is not good enough. I got to change now." Right? Because guy's been dominating the world for a couple months and hasn't gotten his call yet, and he's, well, this clearly isn't working. Let me try something different. And having those conversations about, no, what you're doing is working. You just need to stay the course. That always happens. That's a constant battle that we are fighting with the younger population. And then with the older population, this is something I learned this year in AAA. You don't know everything about a guy until he goes up and gets sent back down. That's the final piece of the puzzle. How they react to that. When they're sent back down, that's when you learn the final lessons about who somebody really is.
Yeah, that's really cool. I never thought of it that way, but I could see that. And my broadcasting days with the Iron Pigs, I seen guys that went up for that first time and come back that were, let's just say maybe a little suspect, in terms of their attitude, or like, what, I had a taste of it. I'm hungry. I want to get back there, and of course, when there are people going back and forth on the AAA big league, monorail, club options have a lot to do with that as well, which maybe some guys don't understand where, hey, I'm out of options, or this guy's got 5. I got a lot to play with here. I can send him back, even though, this other guy may be performing at a little better pace. So I think, and let's hit on that a little, where that guy that did come back to you, does he question himself that, like, she's, maybe this isn't for me, or is he bitter, or is there a guy that says, you know what, I can get back on this horse, stay in a boat, and be confident about it. Seems to me confidence, or maybe reinstalling that or reinforcing that with a guy like that, might be kind of at the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is situation dependent, right? There's guys who get it. They know, like, I'm going up for coverage for 48 hours. I might pitch, I might not pitch, and if I get sent back down, I know I was just here to plug a hole for a few days. The guys who are up there for extended periods of time and then get optioned back down, that's where there's a lot more volatility to the situation. They could very easily come back down and be like, let's go to work. I'm getting back there. I'm going to be the next guy back up. Let's do this. There are those who come back and they're a little bit, they'll tiptoe a little bit. Okay, I'm good enough. I know I can be there. I just need to not mess this up. Just stay ready, be available. And then there's the ones who they don't understand why they got sent back down. Why am I the guy? And those are all very different conversations. And they're conversations that happen as soon as guys get back into the clubhouse. Um, you kind of know in advance. There'll be conversations with, hey, here's how Joey took the option conversation in the manager's office last night. Be prepared. He might come in a little bit hot. Um, but for the most part, guys get it. But you always need to be prepared to have the difficult conversations of here's why you weren't successful. Here's why you got sent back down. And you need to be prepared with a plan for here's how you're going back up.
I would guess, Sean, that once the emotional part of that settles in and perhaps goes away a little, um, their maturity, no matter how old the age you are, their maturity will kind of dictate, how quickly maybe they go back. Or look, we all know sometimes it's for need, sometimes it's to fill a spot for a guy that pulled a hammy for, he's on the in the injured list for a week or so. But for that guy that's aspiring to get there to make an impact, there has to be a certain level of emotional maturity, I would think.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, you want to make sure that you have prepared guys to the point where the moment isn't too big for them. But back to some of the things we talked about at the very top of the conversation here, you don't know until you put them in that situation. You hope that if you have somebody that you know is going to, he's going to be a little bit more of a crock pot meal instead of a microwave meal, right? He's going to need a little bit of time. He's going to need to simmer. You're going to need to give him some runway. Uh, you hope that when that guy's name gets called, you're not in a situation where it's like, we know he needs runway, but we're a half game out of first and it's the middle of September. Um, we're throwing him into the fire. You hope those calls come in May where it's like, all right, we're going to give this guy a few starts. We're going to let him feel it out and gain some momentum. Um, so it really is on the individual. Everybody's going to respond a little bit differently. You kind of have an idea of who's who, but you just hope that there's a situation that affords them the opportunity to be successful. Um, Sometimes you don't have the luxury. Sometimes it's, listen, son, you got to get up there and we got to go, and it's got to be now. So dig in.
Visiting here with Coach Sean Buchanan from the Houston Astros. Once I'm listened to this a few times, I'm going to start writing down the Sean Coach Buccanisms. It's a lot of good nuggets you're rolling out here that I think people like. They resonate with and remember that kind of thing. Sean Buchanan building his very own legacy quite well. If I don't mind saying, when the game is over, what will people remember about you? My book, What is Your Legacy? Challenges leaders, athletes, and everyday people to think beyond the scoreboard. It's about purpose, impact, and the mark you leave on others. If you are ready to define your legacy and live it with intention, this book will guide the way. Get your copy of What is Your Legacy today and start shaping the story only you can tell. Again, available at CoachNeiman.com and at Amazon. Back with Sean Buchanan of the Houston Astros. We are heading into the last and final segment, and we've touched on a lot of areas that we could really probably carve out about 8 podcasts, Sean, and just dive way deep into all of them. But we'll go through the last part here, this last segment. If they're being the Astros with the Astros organization the last 5 years, and after a lot of college stops, how's that changed you at all? What does anything change your own philosophy and, how you see the game of baseball?
Yeah, I think that the more experience you have, the more reps you get with anything, the more comfortable you get in your own skin. And that doesn't matter if it's baseball, if it's golf, if it's public speaking, if it's money management, investing, whatever. The more reps you get, and the higher leverage situations you end up finding yourself in, the more comfortable you get in your skin, the more you're able to slow situations down. Um, I think one of the most important lessons I've learned in my 5 years in pro ball here is, and especially over this last year being in AAA, being in Major League Camp, is that all of these people are humans. They are not this, larger than life thing. They are people just like everybody else. You're probably not going to break them today. Obviously, if you tell them the wrong thing over a long period of time, sure. But if you try to do something and it doesn't work, you can just stop. You can stop. You're not going to ruin somebody today. Um, so don't be afraid of trying things. And that is something that over the course of time, when you feel like you're getting more comfortable in your own skin, you're not as afraid to try things, and that opens up a lot of doors to self-discovery, and that's what ends up helping shape your beliefs, as time goes on.
Yeah, and that's what's I've always been impressed with you. That's what has helped you evolve into being the coach you are today, and your ability to communicate and understand, they're just like you and I, put their pants on the same way, we do when we get up in the morning and get dressed and go do their thing. And they have emotions, and they're real people. So, and everyone is different. To be able to connect with them in that fashion, is why you're very successful in what you're doing. Was there a lesson along the way? Doesn't have to be pro ball, college ball, that you've kind of learned? Maybe it was a hard way. I don't know. Anything that you've learned along the way that you can convey to the players that you touch, that maybe they can avoid.
Yeah, there's so many. There's so many lessons that I'm continuing to learn lessons, hopefully every day. Um, some lessons and overall, just from the career arc of where I've been, where I've come from, and where I've gotten to, is just bet on yourself. Do not be afraid to bet on yourself. That's the most important lesson that I feel like I have learned. Um, Go all in on whatever it is that you want, and don't put a ceiling on yourself. Um, I thought for the longest time, like, hey, being an assistant baseball coach at a nice university or college somewhere, doesn't matter where, like that's probably it for me. That's what I would be comfortable doing. And if I could get that kind of job and just ride it into the sunset for the next 50 years, that'd be awesome. um, and then there are people along the way who encourage me, yourself included. It's like, I think you could do a little bit more, and you can do more, and you can do more. And then eventually I removed that ceiling from myself and started to have conversations about professional baseball. And when I removed that ceiling and I was ready to bet on myself, that's when things really started to accelerate. So don't put ceilings on yourself, and bet on yourself.
Well, those two nuggets right there are, if nothing else from this podcast, you get that those two things: bet on yourself and don't put a ceiling on, because I think we're all apt to do that. And I write about being content in Team Killers. I talk about that. Everybody, hey, we won a championship, we reached a sales goal, we did this, we did it. Well, that's good. And then I would say to you, then what? You can be content in your life, to be where your feet are, circumstance, but what's next? What's next? And that really is a ceiling that is self-imposed sometime, where your club went out and won a championship, or man, you hit all these sales goals, and the next year, because you're so content, you end up being very mediocre. and it's self-inflicted mediocrity, for the most part, because you didn't reinvent yourself. And all right, what I've done this, knowing somebody else is going to try to do it as better, if as good, or if not better, and then all of a sudden I'm vulnerable. But I think those two things are great. Bet on yourself and remove the ceiling. Anybody in your sphere that, I mean, and we're all the same. We all have mentors or people that influence. Anybody that you would want to, point out here that has had an influence on your career, where you've been and where you are today.
Man, I would hesitate to try and single anybody out because I feel like there have been so many incredible people along the way, and there's been somebody at every single stop that has influenced me in one way or another. And I think that that's an important part of anybody's journey. Um, you end up being a a combination of all of the people that you end up spending time with. So making sure you're taking away the most positive pieces of the people you surround yourself with is how you become you in the long run. And I think that that's something that I've done with everybody, from my high school baseball coach to my college baseball coach to the first people that I worked for when I was making $0 as a Division 3 coach to yourself, and then the people along the way at some of the other schools and everybody at the Houston Astros. I'm not going to pigeonhole it to anybody because I wanted to say that everybody on this journey I've been able to take at least one thing from, and you put that into your toolkit, and you figure out how to be a pretty darn good carpenter.
Another one. Yeah, you got to mix that up in the blender, and out comes this, right? Out comes this product that, yeah, I'm pretty good. And the beauty of that is you don't stop. Even me here after retiring and carving out a, what looks like going to be a pretty good second career, I continue to learn. I continue to be very open to other folks that have are doing what maybe I want to do, or I've done it before. Um, and I think if you stop learning, if you start growing, and then maybe it is time to flip the switch and do something else. I think it's really important to continue to grow, reinvent yourself as needed, and don't be afraid to try things. Again, more good buckanisms, if you will, very good nuggets as always. So, picture you work with a guy, and let's say that, and I know you have, you've worked with a guy gets to the big leagues for the very first time. How do how does that make you feel? And on second,
It's
I'm sorry, Sean. And
it
secondly,
is
how
unbelievably
how
good.
how would that make? How would you hope they remember you? That's assuming they'll never get back
So
to AAA, right?
yeah, I mean that's something that we say when we send a guy to the big leagues. We tell him just like, hey, I hope I don't see you again the rest of the year. I hope I don't see you until spring training. Like go be so good that they can't send you back. Um, so that's always the hope. When we tell somebody, especially for the first time, it's emotional, man. Your heart rate goes through the roof when you're telling this guy, and you try and deliver it the best way possible, and seeing that reaction is something that will never ever get old. And you've seen it all, right? I've seen guys burst into tears. I've seen guys completely freeze, and you got to be like, "You good?" And then there are guys that you can see the back. Um, so it is always a phenomenal experience, and is probably the best part of my job when you get to be in the room when somebody gets told that they're going to the big leagues, especially for the first time. And then when they get there, like, I don't really care if they remember me at all. I just hope they remember one thing that happened in our time together that helps them at all when they get there. There's been some pretty cool ones. You know, you know that I'm willing to really think outside the box and do some crazy stuff. Um, there's a crazy drill I gave to a reliever when he was with me, and when I heard that he was still doing that every single day, the first thing I was just like, "Oh man, this poor dude is probably getting made fun of so bad." But he 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 didn't care. He's like, "Oh no, I do this thing every single day. This thing that you taught me, like I'm never gonna not do it. I have to." And stories like that are the most rewarding thing because it's just like, man, he's doing it. He just needed to have somebody help him connect the dots.
Yeah, that's got to be special. I mean, it has to be absolutely special. And I know a lot of managers and coaches have fun with it sometimes, depending upon their own personalities when they deliver that news. But man, I don't know if I could keep a straight face or play with a guy and just say, look, congratulations, we'll see you later. And I don't want to see you again. That is the big, very big part of it. Very cool. So any words of advice, I'm sure you do, for the high school kid, the college player that is heck, even guys in independent ball at this point that are aspiring to get to the major leagues? What would you tell them, Sean?
Yeah, I would tell them that you've got to push all of the chips into the middle of the table. You go all in, and there is no other option. That's how you have to treat this, where it's, I'm going to make it or I'm going to die trying. When you take that approach, you're going to end up being successful. Um, Hopefully that means that you're a 15-year big leaguer and you make 10 all-star teams and you get a plaque in Cooperstown, right? Maybe you don't make it at all, but that mentality and the lessons that you learned along the way help shape who you are and make you really good at whatever it is that you end up doing. Um, but you only find out who you truly are and what you're truly capable of when you push all the chips into the middle and you say, I'm going all in on this. There are no other options.
Yeah, unbelievable. That's if you're not going to do it right, when will you have time to do it right anyway? I mean, what you don't have time to lift and work out and whatever you're doing to accomplish that goal. It takes work. Call it work for a reason. There's no magic wand, for success. Sometimes you get a break. Sometimes, the network jumps in. That's okay. But you still have to have some kind of ability, some kind of performance level that says, yeah, this guy's going to be okay. I don't have this down. Before we get into our last question, I ask you about what straight lines might mean to you. For people that listen, give us an idea of what your schedule might be. Let's say, leading, up into the beginning of the season. You report to, you're doing probably some meetings and work now from home, and then report to spring training and that process, and then when the season starts, just some kind of a general feel so folks know what it is that a AAA coach does, or any professional coach worth his salt is preparing for.
Yeah. So because I'm in a dual role, I kind of at this point in the year have the coordinator hat is on full time. Um, Building out a lot of PowerPoints and a lot of presentations that are going to be educational material for coaches and players throughout some of our early camps that we're going to be doing down in West Palm Beach next month. Educational materials and scheduling and goal setting for spring training. Um, that is taking up 95% of my time right now. Just all the prep work. The prep work starts really end of October into November, and the whole month of December is a lot of heavy lifting. Trying to navigate around the holidays, making sure you're still getting everything done and checking all the boxes. When I get to spring training, I will this year try to wear two hats to the best of my ability. I will be in major league camp making sure that all those needs are met first. And then in any spare time that I might have, I'll be running across the complex to the minor league side and parking myself behind a backstop and evaluating guys on the minor league side. Then once the season starts, the AAA coach hat starts to take a little bit more priority because I got to take care of those guys in that locker room every day. I got to be present with them. They come first. I'm in the trenches with them. We got to take care of each other. And in any spare moment throughout the day, I am trying to keep my eyes on what's happening at the other levels in the minor leagues and offering advice and assistance and analysis in any way that I can. And that will happen for 7 straight months. So it's a lot, but I wouldn't trade it for anything.
Yeah, no kidding. Right. No kidding. You don't just show up and, get between the lines. All the preparation you're doing now is critical for the future success of the pitchers you're responsible for, and certainly the AAA ball club specifically. Um, Pretty good stuff, man. So I ask everybody at the end here, and this is a concept that is catching on pretty quickly. I would say we're number 38 ranked podcast on Apple in the management category. So the straight lines concept is getting some legs, if you will. What does it mean to you, Sean? Do you, yeah, what does straight lines mean to you?
So I think your straight line is whatever your North Star is, whatever the goal is, the destination, the thing that you are constantly chasing, that when you look forward, that's what's in front of you. The path that your feet are on might wind and turn and take you all different ways. But when you look up in front of you, what are you seeing in your mind? That's your straight line. Like my straight line has always been like, I'm gonna do this baseball thing. I'm not ever going to do anything else. This baseball thing. And that has been my straight line, even though the road has taken me in a million different directions.
That's the fun of it, right? There, we all know the path to success is not a straight line, but the better we can keep be on alignment, if you will, the quicker success we may actually achieve and witness. And you are doing just that, my friend. Very proud of you. Thank you for joining me on Straight Lines, where leadership lessons meet the game of life. If you enjoyed today's show, share it with your friends and colleagues. Subscribe and connect with me on social media for more insights. And if you want to dive deeper, check out the 2 books, What is Your Legacy and Team Killers? Please visit CoachTimNeiman.com and check out the new YouTube channel at the Neiman Legacy Network. Until next time, lead with clarity, play with purpose, and keep those lines straight. Sean Buchanan, I can't thank you enough for spending some time with me out of your busy schedule. Been tracking you since I've met you, and so proud of what you're doing. And all my best wishes, to you and the Astros organization. And always here for you, whatever endeavor you go into, and whatever the next step is. Don't forget about me. Thank you, Sean.
Absolutely. Thank you. It's been a lot of fun. It's been a great hour. We'll have to do it again sometime. But as always, thank you for everything that you've done for me. And it's been a heck of a journey.
Thank you, buddy.